I suppose that night when I saw something pull Melissa to try to throw her out of bed, something in me was activated. From that point on, I began to be receptive to things around me, especially, at first, to dreams. Dreams that told me things that were about to happen. Not good or bad things, just simple, silly details. Never anything of real importance, but it was still strange, you know? Like dreaming that in the afternoon I was going to run into someone I did not like, that the package I was expecting would not arrive because it got lost, that my mom would call me to tell me things about my aunts that I did not care about, and that I would not be able to hang up for half an hour despite having very important things to do. Until one dream was different, blurry, hazy, strange. I want to ask you, have you ever dreamed of the death of someone you love? Even worse, have you seen it happen in a dream, knowing that sometimes you have dreams that tend to become reality sooner rather than later? I had one of those damn dreams, where I lost everything I ever cared about. This is the story of a journey, but it begins at home. I am not going to share my name just yet, my dear community, but I must tell you some things about myself. I was born, raised, and lived my entire life until very recently in a small city a few miles from Los Angeles, California. I was always very close to my Mexican heritage, on my mother's side of the family, not only because of family itself, but because of trips I used to make with my best friend, almost a brother, whose family lived in Mexicali. In fact, back then, we used to stay in a room at his uncle's house, and they said the place was deeply haunted. They talked about a man who appeared throughout the house and always went into that room. But neither my friend nor I ever felt anything strange, not in the slightest. That is why I say I simply was not sensitive. I was a skeptic, and that was it. I did not even think about it too much. And it was precisely in Mexicali that I met Estefania, the best friend of my friend's sister. When she was introduced to me, the four of us talked until very late, practically until dawn. One of those hot mornings over there when you keep drinking beer just to bear the heat through the night, I learned her entire story. Just days before, she had managed to escape from her previous relationship, literally escape. Her partner was a violent man who had completely lost his mind and chased her all over the neighborhood with a knife. We continued that conversation back in California. She became my best friend in just a few weeks, the love of my life in just a few hours. And although I always knew she felt exactly the same way about me, she needed, some time to detox from all the bad things she had gone through in her former and only relationship. That is why, for almost half a year, we always went out just as friends. That is how I met Melissa, my little girl, as a friend of her mother. That is how she became the light of my eyes. When finally her mother agreed to be my girlfriend, the love we felt was already inevitable. Melissa's love for me, and mine for her, had also grown so strong that we knew there was no turning back. Only a few months later, we found the perfect apartment to live together near the ocean. We could not see it, but we could hear it sometimes, when the weather was good and the street was quiet. We would open the window to fall asleep listening to it. One night she got a call while the three of us were having dinner. It was from her ex's cousin. I knew it was something serious because Estefania answered. She never did whenever it was him or his family. But something in her, something that night made her pick up. Okay, I will think about bringing her, but if I do, it will be for her sake. If she wants to, nothing else. Not for you all, not for your family, and definitely not for him. When she hung up, she took me into the kitchen and with a mix of sadness and relief, told me that her ex had died, that he had taken his own life. I do not know how. I did not want to know. Maybe she did not know much either, and there was no need. When she told Melissa, who was 4 years old, the child was as unemotional as her mother had been upon hearing the news. The first thing she said was, "Do not make me go with them. I do not want to go with my grandmother." That made the decision simple. She offered her condolences and let them know they would not attend the wake. It was not healthy for either of them. Maybe from the outside it sounds harsh, but trust me, they had their reasons. Besides, his family had never bothered to worry about them or to help them or to do anything about the violence they had suffered. On the contrary, they believed it was her duty to put up with it, that this man somehow had every right to do whatever he wanted. After she called to say she would not go, her phone rang all night long, again and again. First from her ex-mother-in-law's number, which she soon blocked, then from other relatives' numbers, then from unknown numbers and even private numbers until finally she turned the phone off. The moment she did, we heard something strange. I will always remember it. We heard something on the roof, like something fell, and then started walking around up there, pacing incessantly. I went outside to look at the roof from the street. I could not see anything out of the ordinary, and nobody in the neighboring house seemed to have heard a thing. I went back in and told her everything was fine. However, I think in some way we both knew it was not. After that, I began to feel something weird in the house. That was when it started. We all felt it, all three of us. A sense that was always there but got stronger at certain times, in certain places. The clear and undeniable feeling that we were not alone. Sometimes the three of us would be in the living room watching movies, and suddenly, Melissa would turn toward the dark hallway leading to her bedroom and ask us if we saw something, if everything was okay. But I always told her it was nothing. That was when her night terrors, her nightmares began. We learned to live with them. Even so, I rarely managed to convince her to sleep with us. She felt safer hugging her stuffed animals. And then, that happened. That night arrived, the one in which I was sure that something I could not see wanted to throw her out of her bed. That night, something also woke up inside me. Something was activated. First of all, I started remembering my dreams for the first time since I was a child. Second, those dreams began showing me things, little details that were about to happen. That did not scare me. I learned to live with it, just as I had learned to live with many other things. El Risco. I got sick for some reason. I got so sick I ended up in the hospital overnight. And that night I had a horrible dream. Even talking about it is very hard for me. I do not think I have done so since then. But I will trust you now and I will ask you for a prayer after hearing this, please. I dreamed of a car in flames. My car in flames. I tried to get closer, but the heat was unbearable. Inside it, I could not see anything but the fire that consumed it. I knew they were inside it. I could feel it even though I could not see them. But no matter how hard I tried, I could not get closer. I would wake up and then return to that place, dreaming it all again. I was so distressed that at some point during the night a nurse came to check on me and asked if I was all right, if I needed something. I guess she saw how bad I looked and gave me something, and I think that was when I finally stopped dreaming. Or at least I slept deeply enough not to remember it anymore. I wanted to blame those dreams on the worry I felt knowing that Estefania and Melissa were going to travel alone. They were driving from Los Angeles to Chicago to visit her grandfather. He was the only living relative Estefania had left, and she visited him every year. For the first time, they would do it by car. We were supposed to go together. That was the plan, so I could drive. But I was so sick that even though they released me from the hospital, I was too weak to travel. We decided that she would go ahead and I would meet them later, that I would fly there, while in the meantime she would set out on the road. A road trip across the United States, no matter how long, can be tiring but fairly safe, even for a woman traveling with a child. I did not want to let her go, but I had no choice. What would you have done? Told her not to go on that important trip she had been planning for so long, just because I had a bad dream while I was sick? It sounded ridiculous. It sounded crazy. So I accepted that she would go, and the only thing I could do was ask her to drive very carefully. That night before she left, I slept terribly again. I had clung to the hope of waking up better, of having a sudden change of spirit and energy, something that would let me change my plans and travel with them. But that did not happen. I felt worse than the day before, and I could barely stand up to say goodbye. I do not remember much of the night, but I do remember every little detail of that morning before they left. I remember every single thing we did. Like how her cereal was left half-eaten, how there was a coffee stain on the table, how we secured Melissa safely in her car seat, how we slowly walked around the car to get to the driver's side, how Estefania stopped halfway to give Kinder, her cat, one last kiss when it came up to say goodbye. I remember the greeting she gave the neighbor across the street, Susan, who was wishing her good morning with the same joy and enthusiasm as always. I hugged her tight and told her to please pay attention to every little detail while driving, because in that car she was carrying everything that mattered to me in life. She just smiled before getting in. Then she came back to ask a question, her eyes so curious. "Hey, where is El Risco?" I told her I did not know, answering reflexively, even though I did not understand what she was referring to. I followed that with a reply that just came out of my mouth without thinking. "You will find it on the way." She just smiled, got in the car, and drove off. I watched the car disappear down that long street. I tried to distract myself the rest of the day and went to sleep as early as I could. That night, I dreamed again. That night I had that same dream. I was walking down a highway in the darkness until a glow in the distance caught my attention and made me run toward it. A few yards off the road, my car was in flames. I could not hear anything, just like before. I could not even hear the fire. Everything seemed muffled, like listening from underwater to what is happening outside. I tried to approach my car, the car engulfed in flames. I tried to open the doors, burning my hands. I felt my skin scorching, felt pieces of it staying behind on the door handles. Something made me turn around. Behind me, in the darkness barely illuminated by the glow of the flames, off to my side, there was a woman dressed in black. She had very pronounced dark circles under her eyes and was extremely thin, as if she were sick. She wore a rebozo, but it did not look Mexican, not like the ones I knew. She just stared at me. I begged her for help, shouted at her to help me open the doors to check the inside of the car to save them, but she ignored me, and I could not even hear my own voice. No matter how much I yelled, she simply kept watching me. The ringing of the phone woke me up, so loud in my head it was like it was hammering into me. I do not remember the words used to tell me about the accident. I do not remember what I did afterward, or whom I called, or who took care of the paperwork or anything. My consciousness went on pause, like it was helping me survive in a way I do not fully understand. I guess that is how I managed not to go insane, or so I want to believe. My life begins 2 weeks later, waking up in my house with swollen hands, bloody knuckles, and dents all over the walls. It was a horrifying scene. I went to Melissa's room, and among her stuffed animals and her bunk beds, among all the things my little girl had left behind, I saw endless bottles. Whiskey, tequila, rum. There were even keychain-sized bottles that Estefania had brought back from some trip to Jalisco. They were also empty. From what I saw, I even drank a bottle of perfume. I could not bear to see her empty room. I could not bear the thought that she was never coming back, that she would never again play with those toys or decide whether she would sleep in the top bunk or the bottom one. Staggering, I went outside to the yard. The sunlight made me squint. I had no idea what time of day or what day it was. I noticed that Estefania's cat, Kinder, was meowing at me from the house across the street, Susan's house, staring out the window. Seeing him there filled me with shame. No doubt they had taken him in when I stopped responding to him, when I stopped feeding him. I felt like I had also lost him forever. I found my phone under a pile of clothes and plugged it in so I could turn it on. Then, from the hundreds of messages that came in, I realized everyone was worried about me. That yes, I had gone to the funeral but had disgraced myself. Only through these messages did I begin to remember. In scattered pieces, I saw myself drunk, clinging to the coffins, trying to keep them from burying them. I saw myself at night in our now empty home, cursing God for what he had done to me, for what he had taken from me. I remembered turning toward the street through the window. I remembered seeing her there, the woman in black from my dreams. The one I had seen next to the burning car, but now outside on the other side of the street down by the curb. I realized that most likely the dreams and nightmares I had that day had become entwined with my blurry, alcohol-drenched consciousness. I gathered up all the trash I could find and tried to clean my house. I owed that to them. It was their home too. I never would have let them see it like this. I carefully put away Estefania's typewriter. She had the habit of writing letters back and forth with her grandfather. Someone had told her it was good for him, and she kept that habit until her final day. I did not even want to look at what she had written. It felt like peering into an unfinished thought, doomed to roam limbo forever. All I did was clean. While I did it, I could not stop remembering, though I was not sure if those were real memories or still fragments of fantasy trying to connect the dots in my mind. I recalled hearing Estefania's voice in my room at some point during those days. I also recalled feeling happy, getting up, running to our bedroom, and seeing something. Seeing the woman in black from my dreams lying on our bed, her arms at her sides, just staring at the ceiling. When I finally picked up the phone, I only returned 2 missed calls. One was from Rosaline, a co-worker, and one of the people I trusted the most. The other was from my sister Raquel. Those 2 calls are more important to this story than I would like to admit. They set everything in motion. I went to see Raquel, who was very worried about me. She told me my nephew missed me, that he was very concerned after the last time he saw me. I did care about him, my nephew, and it worried me what final image of me he might be stuck with. But more than anything, I agreed to go because I needed to get out of my house, where I always felt accompanied by someone I could not see, someone I could only sense. When I went to see them, my sister did not stop crying for a good while. She told me she had not been able to do it before, not since my family died, and now it all suddenly came pouring out. I tried to recount what happened in the last few days as I answered her questions, slowly working my way back, detail by detail, day by day. Of course, I avoided talking about the woman in black in my hazy memories, about seeing her out on the street in front of my window. And so, step by step, I got all the way back to the day Estefania and Melissa left the house. Then that last phrase from Estefania thundered in my head before she left. That question, "Hey, where is El Risco?" I told my sister about it. Why would she have asked you that? Did you ever talk to her about it? My sister asked. From the look on my face, she could tell I had no idea what it meant. She continued, "Yes, El Risco. Does that not ring a bell? El Risco is the town where our mom was born, but she never went back. It is a little town where no one lives anymore, only ghosts remain. If you never mentioned it to her, I do not know why Steffi would know about it. El Risco." The name started to spin around in my head while I was with her. I just wanted to get back home to think, to understand. I realized it was as if something finally made sense, as if a sound in my mind had finally taken shape. This story, dear community, as I said, is really the story of a journey. It is the story of my visit to that place. But first, I had to explain that moment in my life. When I got home, I went to my neighbor Susan's place across the street to ask her about my cat. I would have understood if she did not want to give him back, but at least I wanted to say goodbye. When I got a closer look, I saw a mark on his shoulder that looked like a burn. It nearly broke my heart. I told Susan I had never intended to neglect him, and that I was grateful she had saved him from me. Susan replied that she understood. She said she had seen how I tried to feed him even though I was lost in alcohol and grief. She told me how a courier service once delivered cat food, and how I came stumbling out to see if everything was okay, or if something else had happened, to see if I had done something reckless, and how somehow the cat was trying to alert people. "I do not want to say someone did something to him," she told me, "but I guess he was afraid of your relative." I asked which relative she meant. "That woman in mourning who stood at your window," she said. "That is why no one called the emergency services to help you, because the neighbors knew you were not alone. They saw someone, a woman in black, at your window." I did not want to tell her that I was alone. I did not want to say I believed that woman she saw was only in my dreams, that I had no idea how she could have stepped out of them. But deep down, I already knew I had no choice except to follow the trail leading to El Risco.